All right, let's talk a little more about this. So the model concept. You're going to create models that, not surprisingly, extend backbone model. You're going to get some stuff for free, part of the deal. You're going to add whatever properties and methods you need to make this model make sense. So whatever, it's probably going to look an awful lot like your Java class that represents that object on your server. Not perfectly, of course, because a lot of times on the server we have this very complicated model, and then we flatten it when we hand it over to the client. So it may have considerably less fidelity. Right. We get a lot of stuff for free by doing that, so a bunch of stuff kind of comes along for the ride. As I mentioned, we get this get set concept for updating and retrieving our values. We get the toJSON thing. We say, hey, model, give me yourself this JSON because I'm going to dump you into this partial template thing over here. We get the save and the validate. Validate's empty. You got to provide it because, of course, it doesn't know how to validate your model. But when you call save, when you call set, it's going to trigger the validate. You can figure out what changed. You can figure out what it used to be. Quite a bit more hiding in there. Again, validate's empty. Not too surprising. You got to implement that. So if somebody does give you bad data, it's going to stop. It's not going to allow that to propagate. So again, we are going to have to do some client-side validation. I know for some people, oh my God, we've repeated some code. Yeah, it's the nature of the beast. All right. To me, the most powerful aspect of this, guys, is if we really do get the view out of the server, now we have that reusability. We can reuse that service across a whole host of clients we never even dreamed of. But that, of course, means we got to have the business logic in the server. Right, so it is a little bit of a change from that. And that, by the way, that's a hard press. So many people have spent so many years building that to be so intertwined that the server knows exactly what the view is, the view knows exactly what the server is, and boy, that pens you in on a lot of things. So you get ways of getting and setting values. You saw collection as well, right? So collection is very powerful. This is where we get some really interesting magic for working with these sets of models. You're going to have multiple collections, multiple models, so it's going to allow you to get through that. Obviously, this is usually going to be a single type. Now, there's nothing that's going to prevent you from accidentally putting the wrong stuff in there, but it is there. There are, of course, events that fire on the collection itself. So you may have a view that cares about the collection, another view that cares about a specific item in the collection. It just depends on what you're trying to do. Not too surprising, when something gets added or removed, you're going to know about that. That's not just going to sneak in. I mentioned underscore as well. Good, I did put it in here. The drop-in replacement for underscore is low dash. Now, I don't have a dog in this fight. Some people are arguing that low dash gives you way better performance than underscore, and it's a drop-in replacement. Your mileage may vary, right? So you will see some folks use that instead of underscore. So as you guys saw before, we get some nice ways of iterating over collections. Some of this, we're still waiting to have this in Java, but we're getting there. So, lambdas, finally. That brand new spanking concept, lambda. All right, so we get ways of parsing and sorting and plucking things out and obviously adding and removing them and quite a bit more. Right, so you can always say, hey, I would like this specific model. Right, and usually there's a client and a server-side ID. So if you create a new instance on the client, it's got a client-generated ID. That probably isn't the kind of thing you're going to want to store as your, blanking on the term, on your database key. Right. Collections can be ordered. You get a much better comparator inside of here than you do just in raw JavaScript. So that's kind of a win there. Fetch will actually go to the server and say, hey, give me the data. And by the way, that's expecting a URL endpoint that follows REST. Concepts from Rails. Right? Now, you don't have to do it that way, but out of the box, that's what it wants to work with, is sort of that Rails sort of opinion on how these things should be named. All right, we saw the view before. The view is a little bit more of a convention than anything else. Some of the differences between some of these libraries does come down at the view level in terms of how much they enforce or not that. Templating is up to you. You can do whatever you want there. You'll see some people just use essentially like jQuery templates. Other people will use, handlebars or mustache. It doesn't really care what you use. I recommend you use something though. All right, trying to, hand code HTML, really friggin' hard. I mean, I remember eons ago I did that on a web app, and it's so impossible to get it right. I mean, I remember I built this thing to add a row dynamically to a table. And I remember when the first times I did it, I was getting nan, and when I was nan, what the hell? How does this sound? Oh yeah, I forgot a tick somewhere. You know, it's just like, oh, good Lord, it's just so painful. So please, please save yourself, you know, some sanity and use your favorite templating library. All right, View, again, not surprisingly, is going to handle your presentation. You're going to link your view to some element on the DOM. All right, now which one? It's up to you. I don't know. I'm not going to tell you which one it is. And by the way, not surprisingly, we get a link to that. So Backbone has this concept, this.el, the element I represent. Now you can bind to something that exists. You can use whatever selector you want for that. You can be as fancy or as not as you want. If you leave it off, which you're certainly welcome to do, you can say, okay, fine, I'm just going to use an empty div. That's pretty safe. Probably going to work. Okay. So as you guys saw before, guess what happens? We're going to render that anytime there's a change in the model. So if somebody updates the model, well, I better change my view then to update the fact that they changed the model. Now that's all going to happen for you. Change event gets thrown. You've told it when the change event happens, call my render method. My render method knows how to render me. Now contrast that with what we've been doing for the last several years, which is, oh, okay, so I gotta retrieve it, and then I gotta fuss with it. You know, I gotta figure out, hey, what was the jQuery method to change CSS again? And wait, can I give it a list of things or separate by commas? Or I can't remember. Well, just try it and see what happens. So you're going to extend that. You're going to implement render. Your render is going to do something really hard. Return the HTML necessary to render it. Rinse, repeat. And it's going to update whatever element you told it cares about. It's going to do that for you. Again, probably leveraging some kind of a templating library. Templates are your friend. I beg you to use them. Now, as you saw, the model says, well, here, I can give you myself as a JSON object. JSON for the win. By the way, don't return XML from your server, please. Ever. Such a bad idea. XML is not fit for human consumption. I have argued with people endlessly over that, but I think we have finally reached the point. In fact, I just saw Tom Mars did a rough card recently on JSON. And I saw a little snippet of an interview with him where he basically said, oh, yeah, no, I won't even touch XML anymore, basically. It's like, yes, thank you. Yes, finally. You'll also get that event hash as well. All right, so this makes it incredibly easy for you to bind to whatever interesting event might pop up that you care about. All right, we saw that template before. You got to give it the event you care about, the selector on that event, and then what do I do when that happens, when that meshes? You don't need the selector necessarily, depending on how you're doing this. So if you leave the selector off entirely, that's cool. It's just going to bind to EL. And by the way, those selectors are within the scope of the this.el. So you don't have to have the world's most complicated selectors. You've already sort of said, okay, I only care about this and below. All right, so that does simplify life quite a bit here. All right, quite a bit more on there. All right, so that's the overall concept, but let's push this one a little further. Let's take one of those existing applications and add a few more things onto it. You know, we throw in a priority button, and you know, let's maybe say that we got some CSS about whether this is a high, medium, or a low. So you want to do these kind of things incrementally. You don't want to just sort of jump right in. Okay, so you want to start by figuring out, all right, well, let's do the simplest thing first. Let's add a button. All right, so where would the button live? All right, not too hard. That's just going to be in your HTML somewhere. All right. Now, in this case, we are using kind of this script text template concept that some people are fond of. You certainly can use it however you want. That's up to you. But you will see this idea. Right? So if you run into this, you're like, wait, this doesn't look like JavaScript. You're right, it's not. It's this pseudo templating concept. All right. So what do we got in there? Some buttons. Oh, look at that. It's just good old-fashioned HTML, like your dad wrote. No. Probably not your dad. All right, let's get to the guys. I'm trying to say we've been doing it forever. This is a data dash concept from HTML5. All right, so data dash, if you're not familiar with it, that's just an arbitrary bucket. You can put whatever you want. Data dash, anything, it's yours, and you still have valid markup if you care about validating your markup. All right. By the way, this is not the only way you could do that. This is just a very expedient way that I used for a workshop. So actually based on something a friend of mine had written. So. Okay, now that's fine, but those buttons need to do something. Otherwise, they're not very interesting. So where would we go to change that? Again, we want to start very simply. Let's make sure that it's wired up. Do the simplest thing first before you dive off into the complicated stuff and go, oh my God, why isn't this working? Let's just do it step by step. Okay, so if we want to add an alert anytime someone clicks the button, we would go somewhere to do that. Okay, so where would we add that event handler, might you ask? Right? How do we add an event handler? Anybody want to guess where we go to do that? Look at that, there's a view, right? And it's got this big event block. Right, so what would we do? We would come in here and, hey, look at that. Click dot priority, change priority. So what does that mean? When I click on something that has that priority class attached to it, by the way, if I wanted to do an ID selector, what would I change? Be a pound sign. Yep. And I'm going to call change priority, which in this case is going to be pretty dumb. Right? But that's what we're going to start with. Very straightforward. Now again, put yourself into the typical jQuery application. Do you have all your events in the same place? Maybe, probably not. All right? So we've got that, and then we have a function. We have a callback function. You guys have been doing this for years. There's no magic here. It just happens to be a function that we call when that happens on that button. So what do? We come in. We're actually going to grab that priority. That's what that data dash priority thing is. It's a little ugly. We're using a little bit of jQuery there. But now, when someone clicks on the button, we get an alert. Yes. Okay, so that's the next step. That's not very interesting. That's not very user-friendly. So that's not something we would want. We would probably want to go in and modify the CSS when someone makes that change. So where would we go to modify that? Remember? You just saw it. It's the view. Anybody know an easy way to update CSS, perhaps using jQuery? Yeah, there's an easy way to do that. So we go to that same view class again. We go to that same method, except now we're going to change it. It's going to do a little more than it did before. We're going to blow that up for you here. And I'm going to drop the alert part. We really delete that. We wouldn't comment it out. And instead, I'm going to play around with some of these jQuery methods. Rinse, repeat. Say, all right, I want to know what the priority is based on that. I'm going to get rid of that, and I'm going to go ahead and tell me what my priority was. And then I cleverly name the CSS the same as the priority. I'm very smart.